And that's what we're still investigating.
Pesticides are another key suspect in the CCD investigation. And one country in Europe provides a perfect case study into how bees are affected by these controversial chemicals. Pesticides have erupted as a national issue in France, where bees and beekeeping have a long and treasured history. In Paris, beehives can be found throughout the city parks. And beekeeper Jean Pocton keeps his hives at the most prestigious address in town, the rooftop of the Paris Opera. Jean believes his big city bees fare better than their countryside counterparts.
Beehives live better in cities because here the trees and flowers are protected, meaning they don't use any pesticides at all.
The French battle over pesticides began in the early 90s when farmers used a new brand of pesticides called neonicotinoids. The chemicals contain neurotoxins and were sprayed as a treatment for sunflower seeds, a favorite source of pollen for honeybees. Not long afterward, the bees began to disappear. The French government banned the chemical, but even after the ban, bee numbers continued to fall. Toxicologist Axel de Courty is investigating whether pesticides are to blame for the mystery of France's bee losses.
Here is a cage that was exposed to a strong dose of the product. We gave them a syrup that contained a strong dose of the pesticide. They ate all the syrup, and here, 3 hours after, we already have some clear symptoms of poisoning.
Tests reveal that pesticides can cause the same symptoms witnessed in bees affected by CCD: loss of appetite, memory loss, disorientation. But he maintains this isn't enough to explain France's dying bees.
After several years of studying this product, we've arrived at the conclusion that the cause is because of many factors. That is to say that the pesticide is highly toxic to bees, that bees could be exposed in weak doses, but the depopulation is probably increased by another factor.
Back at Penn State University, the CCD working group is investigating whether pesticides are finding their way inside the hives. Marianne Fraser is conducting a study on how bees are affected by chemicals in the environment. She's researching whether the new, more toxic pesticides can explain why the bees fail to return to their hives.
We know from some work that's been done in France that these things can impair behavior of bees, particularly their ability to learn. If these pesticides impact their ability to learn, it's totally possible that these bees can't find their way back home.
After setting colonies of bees in fields where chemicals have been sprayed, Marianne collects pollen samples from the hive. The tests reveal disturbing results. The pollen is loaded with over 40 different chemicals.
What we are afraid of is that these pesticides are breaking down the bee's immune system so that if a pathogen were present, is it causing the bees to truly succumb to that pathogen because the immune system has been impacted in a negative way?
Studies have proven that many pesticides are highly toxic to bees. But even in areas where no pesticides are sprayed, bees are still disappearing.
We have people who are losing bees from CCD who aren't anywhere near any sprays. We have organic beekeepers losing bees. So certainly insecticides probably play a role in colony mortality, but I don't think we're going to find that insecticides are the cause of CCD.
However the chemicals may affect the bees, what they bring back to the hive affects us as well. The nectar they gather often ends up on our plates as the bees' signature product, honey. In France, honey is an esteemed tradition. And in the south, the lavender flowers of Provence provide bees with material to make one of the world's most prized honeys, miel de lavande. Every July, the hills are blanketed with rows of brilliant lavender. Beekeepers bring their honeybees to gorge themselves on the fragrant nectar and to harvest the lavender honey they produce as a result. Bees store the nectar they've collected by regurgitating it with enzyme-rich saliva into storage cells. Worker bees fan the cells to evaporate water content, and when the honey is ripened, they seal it over with wax. Humans have been harvesting honey for at least 6,000 years. Ancient Egyptians ferried beehives up and down the Nile. And our age-old love affair with the bees' liquid gold is even depicted in murals in prehistoric caves. One of nature's wonders, honey is antibacterial. And as a result, it never spoils. The amount of honey a hive produces is a sign of the colony's strength. But low honey yield can signal that bees are suffering from another condition that some scientists say opens the door to colony collapse disorder: malnutrition. Andalusia, Spain. Spain has the highest number of commercial beekeepers in Europe, with the most businesses at risk from CCD. In 2006, Spain was hit hard when hundreds of thousands of hives mysteriously disappeared. This year, the situation has improved, but beekeepers are still shaken from last year's losses.
Bees are important because, for example, in this park, 70% of the plants are pollinated. If the bees disappear, then the 70% of these plants that need pollination won't be here.
At the University of Cordoba, malnutrition is one of the main suspects under investigation. Scientists here are studying whether poor nutrition in bees can lead to CCD. They believe bees forced to pollinate on large monoculture farms could be weakened by a single crop diet.
It would be as if we had a pet, a dog for example, and we fed him exclusively bread. That dog would develop a deficiency disease. This is the same thing the bees are experiencing.
The group also targets another theory, that a single-celled parasite called Nosema cerani is the infectious agent behind CCD. The lab discovers an epidemic of Nosema. Every hive they sample tests positive for the parasite. They believe this is exactly why Nosema is not the cause of CCD.
If Nosema is present in all hives, in all of Spain's hives, why are we not having any problems this year? I wish it were that easy. I wish the colony collapse were due to a parasite, because removing that parasite would solve the problem. But it's not always that simple when dealing with nature.
The Spanish team doesn't believe the CCD investigation will isolate a single cause of the outbreak. They contend that a whole conspiracy of forces, from pesticides to parasites to poor nutrition, have created a perfect storm, weakening the bees, leaving them vulnerable to infection. The bees may be in even greater danger than scientists previously thought.